How is everybody? Good. You turn your Bibles to Judges, the 13th chapter. We begin the story of Samson. This is a great story. It's one of the loved stories of loved from the standpoint of individuals love it as they read it from the Bible. It's one we teach our children. You know, everybody knows the great strong man of the Bible. But it is sad to see the weaknesses of this strong man. I preached years ago, I preached a sermon on Samson and entitled it The Weakest Strong Man. There are great weaknesses in Samson, in his story, and we will point those things out. This 13th chapter, as we began this evening, this 13th chapter it's short, but there's a lot of repetition in it. And yet there's also, and I'm not going to enumerate, but there are several things, just kind of go through it and look at it sometime, maybe tomorrow or the next day, and think about some things that are not there in the text. The 13th chapter, one of the things you'll find is just a mention of God. It talks about the man of God, it talks about the angel of the Lord, but just an idea of God is not there in this chapter, which is an interesting thought. There are some other things. But when we look at the Bible and we look at stories in the Bible, we see not just stories and not just characters. We see people and we see the things that they did and the things that went on to them. And one of the things that we need to do in our studies is to take a step back and to ask ourselves, why is this here? Now, when you think about it, when you read through the book of Judges, the first answer that comes to your mind is it was because he's one of the judges. He's probably around the 13th judge that we have in this story. And so he's one of the judges, so that's why he's there. Well, let me ask this question then. Why does this book give so much attention to Samson? You know, Samson and Gideon are the two probably longest stories in this book. Deborah's story it covers a couple of chapters, but Gideon and Samson are probably the two longest. And why does it tell about this man and his feats of strength, but also his spiritual weaknesses? Well, think about it from this standpoint. I want you to think about it. It'll probably take us a couple of weeks to get through this. But I want you to think about how that here's a man that basically goes from faith in himself to faith in God. His very last act, he calls upon God. All throughout his life, though, seemingly, my strength, my intelligence, my intellect, my wit is going to get me through, and I'm going to do what I want to do. But then at the end, he calls upon God. And so we can look at his weaknesses, and we'll point those out, and we'll see those things. But we see a man that transitions, if you will, from trusting himself to God. This story, think about it, put in so that it reminds not just us, but those people of that day and age. Israel, don't trust in yourself. Just because you're God's people, just because you're God's nation, don't just trust in that. Trust in God. Not just your position and not just your attributes that you have. Kind of hold that thought, if you will, in your own thinking, and as we go through this story. Again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yes, they've done it 6 times before in this book. This idea of sinning and leaving God, even during times of goodness and prosperity. They did evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord delivered them to the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, if we were to go back and look, when the Philistines came, they came in sort of real easy and just began sort of slowly and gradually taking over. It's sort of like the difference when you put water on the stove, you put it on to boil. You got cold water and it transitions, but as it transitions from cold water to eventually water that is boiling. It takes a while. When Philistines came in, they came in and they just sort of just eased their way in slowly but surely. And there was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, in other words, from the tribe of Dan, whose name was Manoah. Now, the name Manoah means resting place. And his wife was barren, had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Indeed now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore, please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and not to eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. Notice this angel of the Lord. Now remember, angel of the Lord. And notice what it says, the angel of the Lord. When we talked about angels back some time ago, we talked about there seemingly is a difference between an angel and the angel of the Lord. You see the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, believed by many to not only just be deity, but believed by many to be Jesus. Because after Jesus is here upon the earth, you don't see a mention of the angel of the Lord. And so exactly if we can say that that's true or not, that's one of those things you kind of just have to read and believe and see for yourself. But this angel of the Lord comes to Samson, what would be Samson's mother, and Samson's father, of course, to Manoah. And as he comes to Manoah, he says, look, you're going to have a son. And he talks about, here's what you don't do. He's going to be a Nazarite. Well, we talked about that Sunday. I think just about everybody was in here Sunday for Bible study. But Nazarite vow found in the book of Numbers, this chapter, Nazarite vow was a vow of consecration, usually just for a period of time. But it was going to be, for Samson, it was going to be for a lifetime. You didn't touch the grape. You didn't touch anything dead. You offered at the end of the time, you offered a sacrifice to God as sort of a commitment and a consecration. You didn't drink wine. And of course, for Samson, the requirement was that he wasn't going to cut his hair, long hair. Do you remember in the late 60s and early 70s, do you remember the big debates in the church over men and long hair? The answer is yes, we did it. Why? I don't know. Which we hadn't, but we did. But nevertheless, Samson's hair was not to be cut. And notice that it says for Manoah's wife, it says, okay, she's not to drink wine or similar drink. She's not to eat anything from the standpoint of unclean. So in other words, she didn't have barbecue. She didn't have catfish. She didn't live in the South. she couldn't have those things. She couldn't eat things that were considered unclean. And like I say, the son, it talks about she bear a son and no razor come upon his head. He's going to be a Nazarite, and he's going to be that for life. But also, notice what the Lord promises, the angel of the Lord promises. He shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And so there's a promise. There's a promise of victory that's coming. So the woman came and told her husband, saying, a man of God came to me, and his countenance was like the countenance of the angel of God. Very awesome. But I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. And he said to me, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb of the day of his death, or from the womb, to the day of his death. So it's a lifetime. She is recounting to Manoah, here's what I was told, here's what I saw, here's what happened. And so you just have a repetition of what you've already seen. And Manoah prayed. His immediate reaction as she retells the story, his immediate reaction is, well, let's pray. Let's pray. Let's pray to God. Let's talk about this to God. And so he prayed to the Lord, and he said, "Oh, my Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come to us again and teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born." I want you to notice two things. I want you to notice, first of all, that there is evidently a lack of knowing exactly who this angel of the Lord was. He's referred to as a man by Manoah and by his wife, but the man of God. They don't know. They don't. I'm wondering if they realize that this was actually a messenger of God, that this was God's message to them. Because when Manoah offers up a prayer, he says, this man of God whom you sent, he came to us. So he understands a little bit, but to what extent, it seems to be fuzzy. Now, second of all, notice what he asks. Teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born. Help us to know. Help us to know what to do with this child. Tell you a personal story, a little story. Suzanne and I tried for a while to have a child. And I remember, you have the in-home pregnancy test, and we were fairly sure she was expecting. But anyway, we did the in-home pregnancy test one morning, very early. And she came back quite excited because it was positive. And we had Ethan. And we had 2 subsequent miscarriages after that. So we just had Ethan. But anyway, that day, and I remember after we got through crying, the first thing we did was we prayed. Help us be good parents. Teach this child. This is the request of all of us that have children, that are God-fearing folks that have children. God, help us with this child. Help us to raise this child. Help us to do what we can for this child. And that's really what Manoah is asking. It's the prayer of all parents. It's really the prayer of all grandparents as well. I was talking to Miss Marie Garland today, and she told me she had great and great great grandchildren. That's wonderful. But when you stop and think about wherever down the line we're praying, and we're praying for those children. Well, and so this prayer that Manoah asked is, I think, a beautiful prayer. Lord, teach us what we should do with this child. And God listened. There's key. Now we know that God always listens, but I just like that statement. God listened to the voice of Manoah. And the angel of God came to the woman again as she was sitting in the field, but Manoah, her husband, was not with her. Then the woman ran in haste and told her husband and said to him, "Look, the man who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me." So Manoah arose, followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" And he said, "I am." Manoah said, "Now let your words come to pass. What shall be the boy's rule of life and his work?" We want to know everything you can tell us. We want to know it all. What can you tell us about what he's going to do, what he's going to be like, how is he going to be? You look into the child, to the eyes of your baby, whether it's your baby or your grandbaby or great grandbaby. You look into the eyes and you wonder, what's he going to be like? How's he going to be? How are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to be when you grow up? Manoah is asking those questions. So the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, "Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful." The word careful there has the idea of let her keep watch. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor may she drink wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean. All that I commanded her, let her observe. Think about this from another standpoint. We look at it, and we look at it from a religious standpoint. It is part of the Nazarite vow. It is part of Numbers 6. It is part of being consecrated to God. But also look at it from the standpoint of a very healthy pregnancy. In other words, angel of the Lord's trying to direct her. God's trying to direct her. Here's the you stay. You make sure that you eat things that are fit, clean. You don't drink wine. You stay healthy. And so Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, verse 15, please let us detain you, and we will prepare a young goat for you. Hospitality. Manoah is a man that, when you look at it, you can say several things about him. First of all, he's God-fearing and godly. Why? Because he praised God, first thing. Second of all, he's a man that evidently loves his family and is concerned about his family and the direction of his family, because he's asking the angel of the Lord, tell us about him. Tell us what he's going to be. Tell him what, and he asked, Lord, can you help us with him? We see these things. We see a man that evidently loves his wife. When she comes, and when Noah's wife comes and says, look, the man that came to me the other day, he comes immediately. He's concerned about his wife. Tell us everything we need to know. And tell us about the words that you told her. What did you tell her? And so he's trying to make sure everything's correct. But now also look at his hospitality. Can you stay with us? We'll prepare a young goat. There are discussions in religious books, commentaries, so forth, that speculate. And sometimes folks, preachers, theologians do that, unfortunately. And it would just seem as if this was a regular meal, but there are some theologians that speculate that what Manoah's offering was, he wanted to offer a sacrifice. But it seems as if it's because of what is said from there on, that it's just a regular meal. The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, though you detain me, I'll not eat your food. See, he seems to think it was a meal too. But if you offer a burnt offering, now this is what, see, that's where they get, folks. You must offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know he was an angel of the Lord. He refused, interesting, this angel of the Lord refused to eat, but he was willing to accept the sacrifice. But notice, the sacrifice must be two. The angel of the Lord didn't say, make the sacrifice to me. He said, make the sacrifice to the Lord. The Lord is always to be praised. And that's important, that we remember the order of things. That, yes, men can be praised for their accomplishments, but who gave them the ability and the strength? God. God did. And so God is to be praised first. And that's what the angel here wants to be sure that is done, that God is praised, that God is exalted. Then Manoah, verse 17, said to the angel of the Lord, what's your name? That when your words come to pass, we may honor you. Interesting question. Does he want to honor the angel of the Lord? Yeah. Could it be, Harold Shank in his commentary says, you wonder, and that's kind of the way he put it, you wonder if maybe Manoah was interested in naming him after this angel of the Lord. Well, we don't know. Maybe he wanted to erect some sort of special monument. Maybe he wanted to name the child after him. Who knows? But he asked him his name. The angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name? Seeing it's wonderful. So Manoah took the young goat, kind of ended that, if you will, with a question. The story goes on. Manoah took the young goat with grain offering, offered it up on the rock to the Lord. Grain offering, cereal offering. Go back and read the book of Leviticus. A lot of times you'll hear it referred to as a cereal offering. It's the same thing. Grain offering, cereal offering. It was that which you would think of. Literal grain offered as a sacrifice to God. And the grain offering was always a thanksgiving offering. It was a thankful offering. And so it's an offering of thanksgiving for what's being done and what's happened. Notice that it says upon the rock to the Lord. There, a lot of times the places, if you will, that you could offer a true sacrifice to God was just a rock. And they would heat it and put fire up under it, and so they would lay it out upon the rock oftentimes. And so this is probably what he did. And it says, and he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked on. This angel of the Lord, that is. It happened as the flame went up toward heaven from the altar. The angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. And it almost shows, if you will, he was from God. So he goes up in the flame. He goes up towards heaven. The angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. And when Manoah, his wife, saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. Now they've truly realized this is a messenger of God. And so, when the angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife, then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, "We'll surely die because we've seen God." If you recall, back a couple of years ago, we studied the book of Genesis, and when we studied the book of Genesis, we talked about how that no one has ever seen the face of God. And the belief was in the Jewish realm at that time is that anyone ever saw the face of God, they'd what? They'd die. And so now Manoah says, "Oh, we've got problems." Looks at his wife and she says, "Well, what are they?" He says, "We've seen God." You see, once again, this is another one of the arguments that's used, that the angel of the Lord is the Lord, it's deity. That even Manoah realized that. Well, nevertheless, the tradition, the custom of the time was the belief that they're going to die. We've seen the Lord. But his wife said to him, "If the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have told us such things as these at this time." Beautiful logic, beautiful argumentation. In other words, why would he have done all this? Why would he have accepted the burnt offering? Why would he have talked to us? Why would he have told us all these things if we're just going to die? Because implied within her logic is this: he could have kept us from seeing him and thus kept us alive. And so it makes no sense to do all of this, tell us all of this, and get us set and ready for all this, and then take our life. And so her logic is sound. So the woman bore a son, called his name Samson. Now, here's something that I did not know till today when I got to looking at it. The word Samson means son, S-U-N, or little son, S-U-N. And so think about that, and I'll show you how it kind of plays in the next chapter, but it's kind of interesting. But she called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahan is how you pronounce that, Dan, which just simply means camp of Dan. Remember, they were Danites. They were from the tribe of Dan, and this is where we're located. The tribe of Dan would be really on the coast. The Mediterranean would have been south of the Sea of Galilee, but then straight over. Along the lines of west of Ephraim, if that helps you any. And so this is where they are. This is where he grew up. And notice that it says he's between Zorah and Eshtaol. And we'll talk about Zorah here in just a few minutes when we get into the next chapter. This is a wonderful story. Anything that I missed or you'd like to talk about? Or well, let's move forward then. Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Zorah, which is where they were. Now notice that it says that they were between Zorah, and notice verse 2. Go back to the 13th chapter for a minute. Something I didn't point out. That once again, really hadn't even thought about this till today either. There was a certain man from Zorah. We would often say, well, he was from the town of Zorah. Harold Shanks gives a possibility that's a little different. Not from the town of Zorah, but from the surrounding area of Zorah. And you have to understand, Zorah is up in the hills of the area. And so he is in the hills. And notice, now go back to verse or chapter 14. He goes to Timnah. And notice what it says. He went down to Timnah. Timnah was about 6 miles west of Zorah. And so when he went to Timnah, he went down from where he was, from the area where he was. He goes down to the valley. And there he sees this lady. She is a Philistine lady. And so he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I've seen a woman in Timnah, the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me as a wife. This is where we begin to see, and we haven't, this is really the first things we've seen of Samson. We've seen if you will, the foretelling of how he was to be raised, the foretelling of him coming. Now we see Samson. He's here. And first thing we see him is he's wanting to marry a Philistine wife. According to the law, this is not something you did. You stayed within your race, your clan, or your tribe and your clan. The family tree didn't have a lot of forks in it. It was pretty straight, really. So to marry a Philistine, and remember the Philistines, you know this, we didn't point it out a while ago because you know it. The Philistines were really a godless people. They had gods, but not the God. And so to marry a Philistine would have been to have married, in the eyes of an Israelite, a foreigner. And that was absolutely forbidden. It's interesting to note as well, sort of his attitude, at least as the author here portrays him. It's not, hey, mom and dad, I'd like this. I'd like to marry this Philistine woman. I'd like to be with this Philistine woman. I met this Philistine woman and she was quite intriguing. Wasn't any of that. Now remember, dads arranged marriages with their children. I'm glad we don't do that anymore. Ethan got exactly the girl he needed and the girl that's right for him. But at the same time, too, I don't know. I wouldn't have met her, though. He met her at Freed-Hardeman. So, but it seems as if Samson is demanding of his parents. This is the girl I want. This is the one I want you to go get. Then his father, verse 3, and mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among all my people that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? Now, you can look at that a couple of different ways. You can look at that as a truth, uncircumcised Philistines. Or you can look at it from the standpoint of Manoah's not being very nice. He's probably said something in the way that's not very nice about these Philistines. He's probably just pointing out, these are not our folks. Trying to probably emphasize the idea, these are not our folks. Thus, this is a violation of the will of God. But remember what we said. We said Samson goes from a man who seemingly trusts in himself to a man that trusts in God. Here's this idea of trusting himself. He doesn't need the ways of God. So Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she pleases me well. A violation a violation of the law of God. Exodus 34, Deuteronomy chapter 7. A violation of the will of God to go outside, you people. But think about what he says. She pleases me. It wasn't, she's going to help me get to heaven. That's what we always tried to instill within our son was, we want you to marry a girl that you love and that loves you, that we can love, but most definitely that will help you get to heaven. That's what we want. Well, that's not his interest. His interest is she pleases me. She's the woman that I want. She pleases me. But his father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Verse 4 is not an explanation of how, but an explanation of what's happening. What is it? What's happening? God's working. That providence of God. Yeah. Doesn't explain how. And the Bible, well, Lord, don't strike me for this. The Bible doesn't explain to my complete satisfaction providence. Do I believe in providence? Absolutely. Do I trust in providence? Absolutely. Do I believe that God works? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Do I understand how? No. But I'm not real sure. I've heard Jim and JR talking about the way this building's wired, and I saw them fooling with it one day. And I'm not real sure how you get power from a pole out there to a box in here to all the different places in this building. They know how to do it. I don't. Now, there's nothing I know that they don't know. Those are two smart dudes, but they know how it works. But I have no clue. You wouldn't call me to do your electrical work. I don't have to know how it works to understand it works. I don't have to understand how a car works to understand it works and when it's working properly. I don't have to understand how the providence of God works. I just have to have the faith to trust in God that it will. And that's what's going on here. Can't answer correctly. God's at work. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Glancing at my notes here, it's kind of interesting because as I was studying and thinking about this, if you look in verse 3, Samson has the wrong priority. She pleases me. Now I'm going to show you where he has the wrong place. Look in verse 5. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother and came to the vineyards of Timnah. What's he not supposed to have? Wine. Nothing of the vine. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. He's just going to walk through it. Do you walk through a vineyard without testing the grapes? Could you? I mean, most of us can't walk through a garden that's got a tomato that we don't wipe it off and eat it if whoever owns it will allow it of us. Right? He's in the wrong place. Not supposed to be, you might say, well, he's just walking through it. Okay. We can give him that, but at the same time too, he's really in the wrong place. These vineyards, if you get to looking at where they are close to what other famous vineyard? Do you have an idea? Numbers 14. Do you remember who was back there? Joshua and Caleb. Remember the spies and remember the big clusters? This is kind of that area. And so they're in amongst, if you will, in the wrong place with the wrong priority. He's gonna mess up a couple other times, but we see now that where he's headed is in the wrong direction. Now, to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him. the surprise might be twofold. I believe it's the surprise of the lion that the text is really talking about. But there also may be the surprise of the strength that he had. Because as the lion comes out roaring against him, it says the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart, as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. So he kills this lion with his bare hands, which is going to present a problem, right? Remember, he's going to go back and he's going to eat of the honey out of the carcass, right? Guess what? From a standpoint of a Nazarite, he wasn't supposed to touch. Dead body. Samson is a great story and a great screw up. He's a great screw up. But we'll talk about that anyway when we get there. But notice his strength. This is the first, evidently, time that he needed great strength, but he had great strength. And so he kills this lion. You might say, well, he was defending himself. Yeah, but he wasn't supposed to touch blood or anything like that. That's part of the Nazarite vow. It presented problems. You might say, well, what was he supposed to do? I get you. I understand. He kills, though, the lion, and he doesn't tell his mom and dad what happened. It says, let's see, in verse 7, then he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. After some time, when he returned to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. He took some of it in his hands, and he went along eating. How do you eat honey that you don't make a mess? Sticky, gooey. I don't care if it's just straight out of the hive, still sticky and gooey. I can't imagine sticking your hand in the carcass. I can't, first of all, I couldn't do it because I'd have to have Benadryl before I did it, because sure enough, they're going to sting you, right? And you sting me, I swell up. But he sticks his hand in there. The bees seemingly don't bother him. He sticks his hand in there. He takes the honey, he dips it out. He's eating, and as he's walking, he's still eating. I'm sure, you didn't want to shake hands with him when he got finished, but nevertheless, he just tells you. I was trying to say that in a nice way, but yes, it does. Finger looking good. There you go. And so when he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them. Oh, yeah, sure. They also ate. This would not pass hygiene standards of today. But he did not tell them that he'd taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Now, he ate out of something that was dead, so he violated the Nazarite law. Anything that was dead, he wasn't supposed to touch. He didn't tell his father and mother where it all came from, so his father and mother went down to the woman, and Samson gave a feast there for the young men used to do so. So there's a banquet. There's a banquet thrown. It's what do we call them now? Rehearsal dinner. There you go. We have rehearsal dinners. I enjoy rehearsal dinners now because, if you're preaching them, they usually invite you and they usually have pretty good food. It's not bad. But so they have a rehearsal dinner, if you will. And it happened that when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Then Samson said, let me pose a riddle for you. And if you can correctly solve and explain it within 7 days of the feast, that I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you will give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. I am going to stop because they've already rung the bell. I'm going to stop right there. You know this story. I mean, you know it. I know you know it. And we're just having fun going over it again. But it is worthy of thought, and it is worthy of consideration. As we get to the end of the 14th chapter, I want us to see if we can learn some lessons from it. I kind of had hoped to get that far tonight, didn't, but that's all right. We see a man that, like we said, in many ways was the weakest strong man that ever was. Chose the wrong wife, was in the wrong place, had the wrong priorities. And yet, here is a thought for you as we leave. God still used him. God can use you. And when we give ourselves to him to be used, he will use us. But even God can use the individual that is not righteous, that is not church going, if you will, not a Bible reader, not a prayer person, but God can still use them. And he does. Anything else in there? Well, all right. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day, for the blessing of it, for the opportunity that we've had to come together this evening to study your word, for this story, realizing the importance that we should put upon not only just following you, but truly trusting in you and following your way and your way alone. We ask that you be with us, that we can constantly, as we study your word, find those things that you are wanting for us to know, to learn, and to live, and that we will do those things in accordance to your will. We ask that you watch over us now, be with those that were mentioned a while ago by Jay, and we ask your prayers upon them, be with every one of us, be with this congregation as we move forward, that we'll constantly strive to tell others of your saving grace and your wonderful mercy. Watch over us, bless us, and keep us, and hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great week. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all.